Before we get into today's episode, I want to make a quick announcement about the podcast. We are going to take a break during the college basketball season. I'm not sure if I've mentioned it on the show, but I have returned to the Shenandoah University's women's basketball staff. Because of that, I don't have the time to keep up with the podcast and the quality I can be proud of. I'm still working with young athletes and teams in many different capacities. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. If not, we'll be back in March or April of 2026.
Hoops through life. Hoops through life.
Welcome to another episode of Hoops Through Life, a podcast where we discuss everything related to women's basketball player development, the collegiate recruiting process, and transition from high school to college. I'm your host, Elsbeth Bierman. Our guest today is Nicole Adach. Nicole is a sports psychology professional and psychotherapist with over a decade of experience helping athletes and high-performing individuals strengthen their mental game, build resilience, and reach peak performance. Nicole currently serves as a student-athlete support clinician at Northeastern University, where she works with athletes to navigate the pressures of competition, balance their mental health, and develop skills that translate beyond sport. In her private practice, Nicole specializes in the intersection of mental health, wellness, and performance, bringing together her clinical expertise and her own background as a collegiate athlete. She's particularly passionate about helping athletes explore their identity beyond sport and supporting them through the often challenging transition out of athletics. Nicole, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
All right. So what was the moment? You have so much experience, but what was the moment when you realized how important mental health and performance is to athletes?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I look back and try to figure that out myself sometimes. I think I always knew that it was important, that mental health was important, training your mind was important, having a strong mind was important. My dad actually got me a book about getting I forget what the book's title was. I think it was called Winning State Basketball. It was a soft cover, it wasn't a hardcover. It was a spiral notebook that he found. And I was in
Just on the
middle
street.
school. Yeah, literally. I was in maybe middle school, maybe. And it was the importance of, quote, letting the big dog out, which essentially is play with confidence, be confident, allow your confident self to play and to show up on the court. And I always knew it was important, but I never knew how to actually implement some of the strategies that help you train your mind. I just knew that it was important. So I think it started at a very young age, but it wasn't until I was finishing up my collegiate career that I was like, oh, shoot, there are some things here that I did not, emphasize or didn't focus on during my athletic career. And now I want to help athletes make sure that they do focus on those things and take care of their mentals like they do their physical body. So I would say it started young, but the actual awareness that you need to do particular things with intention to train your mind, take care of your mental health and, strengthen mental skills. I would say that was when I was in grad school in my 20s.
Yeah. So it sounds like the seeds were planted when you were super young.
Mm-hmm.
And then what was it though about finishing your career or being in grad school that was that something clicked, oh my gosh, this is important, or how to implement it, I should say.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I, again, you touched on it with the intro, I really started studying athletic identity. When I was in grad school, I got my master's in clinical psychology, and I was studying the mental health of athletes and what happens to our understanding of who we are when our sport is taken away. So I started recognizing oh my gosh, this big transition that I'm currently going through as a 22-year-old is something that every athlete essentially has to go through at some point. And so through my own experience, I developed eating disorder, and I had really a lot of issues after college, trying to navigate who am I without this sport. Going to the gym, but for what purpose? The means to an end, going to the gym became the end itself. Going to the gym was just to go to the gym. So then my goal became perfection, and I noticed my mental health deteriorating. And I think it was a lack of purpose. So I had a lot of personal motivation to figure it out and to learn how to take care of the mind, how to identify myself as more than just the basketball player, and how to take care of myself from the inside out. So I would say it was a personal journey for me that has led me, in a very roundabout way to help others do the same.
Yeah. And I have a question specifically about identity. And so we're kind of leading right into it. So you don't have to talk about, you can talk about your personal experience, but you can also talk about the experience of working with a lot of athletes. But how, like looking back now, what are the things that you could have done, or how do you help athletes now through expanding their identity while they're still playing? Because I like a lot of what you said, a lot of the same things that happened with me when I finished playing, and especially like the going to the gym part. It's like, what's the point? You know, games aren't around the corner.
Yeah. Yeah. And with identity, it's hard because I think a lot of times it's a lack of awareness, not knowing how much of your identity and your mental health is tied to your athletic performance and your role as an athlete. So for me, looking back in hindsight 2020, if I had a bad night, I was in a terrible mood. My mom still brings up this time in high school. I had a bad game and she came to hug me and comfort me after the game. We were like eliminated from the playoffs. And I like pushed, like shoved her, not shoved, but like I like gave her distance, gave her the stiff arm. I'm like, I'm not doing this right now because I had a bad game. So I felt bad about myself. My self-esteem was low. My performance, that was, an underperformance meant that I was underperforming in life, like in my high school brain. So I think, looking for red flags of like how much of your identity, as an athlete impacts your mental health, how you feel about yourself as a whole person. So I think like looking for red flags and kind of recognizing that. And I think knowing that you can still be a phenomenal athlete and also a friend and a sister and someone who loves reading and math and gardening or whatever. Like there are more pieces to you than just this one thing. And so that's what I studied in school, this difference between like a one-dimensional, unidimensional identity. I'm athlete, athlete is me. And the multidimensional approach to identity of I am this person who plays basketball, who studies psychology, who has all these friends, who loves family. So really, seeing your identity as more than just one thing. And I think athletes see that as like a weakness or a threat to their performance. Like if I'm not giving 100%, then I'm not going to be my best or I'm not going to be the best, which is even more dangerous. So really encouraging athletes that actually giving yourself more creates, an increase in performance because you're not like only looking through that lens. So it's hard to do, but I think, I use the analogy of like a bouquet of flowers. There's a lot of flowers in that bouquet. It's not one flower. One flower wilts, you throw that flower away. You don't, throw the whole bouquet away. So one bad performance doesn't mean the bouquet no longer exists. But yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, and there were a couple of things that you said in there. One kind of has to do, well, I don't know. You can give me your opinion. A lot of times I will hear coaches say, or I'll hear athletes say, oh, I had a bad game. Let's say a player has a bad game and they're not upset about it. And a coach's perception could be, oh, they don't care. Like they don't care about the sport, they don't care about the team, X, Y, and Z. So how do you help an athlete navigate that, or a coach navigate that idea of I am a whole person, I'm not just this one thing, and this one thing doesn't equal me being bad, or this one, like I don't have a good game doesn't mean I am a bad person. I don't have a good game, that doesn't mean I need to be upset for a week. You know what I mean? Like how do you help them navigate that because that is part of the sport culture in and of itself too. So it's like kind of pushing against that in a sense.
Yeah, I remember being brought up with the message like, if you're not working hard all the time, Susie down the street is. Like that was the mindset. It's like, if you're not working hard, someone else is. You're going to lose your opportunities. And so I always trained with this like fear mentality or like a scarcity mentality. There's not enough space for everyone. So I have to top other people. So I think to go back to your question, because I can go on a whole tangent there, but to go back to your question, it's really about knowing your athletes and knowing what their baseline is. And I always say, like, look for the red flags, like find those red flag kids. Like, if a kid's on your team and like, you notice their mood is just absolutely dropped and low, if they have a bad day, a bad game, noting that and talking to them about it or about, to their families, depending on the age of the kid, of course, but noting and observing, making that observation. Hey, I noticed that when your stats aren't where you want them to be, your mood is low. And I notice when you perform really well, your mood is high. very normal as an athlete to experience like a happiness after a good game versus like sadness after a bad. But if it lasts a day, 2 days, a week, month, problem, a little bit of a red flag. And then the other end of the spectrum, if a kid is like poorly performing and they don't care at all, and from the coach's like perspective, it's like this kid doesn't even want to be here. Again, knowing the kids like baseline, knowing how they typically are is important, because if they're not usually like that and then they develop this tendency to kind of be apathetic, okay, that's notable. Like, oh, they've shifted a little bit. Whereas if they're always like that, maybe their identity isn't tied to their sport, and that's okay too. You can, like I said, like both and thinking here is so important. It's not like you're either an athlete or you don't care. It's I am both an athlete who's competing and got other stuff going on. So sometimes that does like bleed into the court and whatnot. So really knowing your personnel, knowing your players, knowing your athletes, and then the athletes knowing themselves, and like, oh, like I have been more impacted lately, or that's kind of the way I am. Like, in knowing yourself, knowing your athletes, so that you can make observations and from a caring place, just kind of raise concerns if they come up.
And I think that most, if not all, people would agree that playing, they talk about the flow state, right? Like playing in a relaxed state, you'll get better performance. And so I think it's so fun. It's not funny, but it's counterintuitive when you say the idea of like perfectionism, wanting to, outperform in approaching training from like this fear mentality. You'll never get the results that you want, because like it's just not going to happen. Do you like, I don't know, how do you help the athletes that you work with navigate that piece of it? So the piece of like grind never stops. I could say 1,000 things that I've seen on social media just talking about how you need to be working out 24/7.
Yeah, it's interesting, because if someone's always intense, eventually that flame does die out. Like it's extreme and intense, and then all of a sudden like crash. Whereas if someone can like, intentionally progress and put more work in on certain days and weeks, great. But it's cyclical and like seasonal, just like a sports season is. Like if it's always heightened and always up there and you always need to be doing more, like likelihood is that it's not going to stay there forever. It's not sustainable. So, I think when it comes to like that perfectionism, I talk a lot with athletes about staying present in the moment. You mentioned flow state or being in the zone, whatever athletes kind of define as that. The only way to truly be in the flow state is to be present mentally and physically. So a lot of times athletes go into a performance. So say a basketball player goes into a game and they're thinking, if we lose this game, we're not going to make playoffs. We're not going to, I'm not going to be seen by this recruiter or whatever. They're going into this outcome, which is ironically, like it's a good intention. Like I want to win, but it's ironically a paradox, because now this athlete's mind is in the future about like what they need to have happen outcome related. And it's taking them out of the moment to actually, be in the process to get to that outcome, if that makes any sense. So a lot of times athletes who are so outcome focused lose sight of the process, and they get, disrupted or discouraged if they're not at that outcome right now. And so that takes them out of the moment. I'm sure you've seen athletes on teams that you've coached where they're catching the ball already thinking about they better make this or else. And then you're tight and then you don't make the shot and then you're mad, and it's the cyclical kind of downward spiral. So I really educate athletes on the tendency that a lot of us have to be mental time travelers. That's like what I call it, where your body's in the moment, but mentally you're thinking about the future or you're dwelling on the past. The goal is to notice when that's happening and bring your mind to the present moment where your body is. And that does prevent a lot of this like need for perfection or fear, because fear is about something in the future. Perfection is about a future outcome. So really bringing yourself back to the present moment, being in that flow state, being in the present moment, connecting mind and body, you're going to be in that ideal, optimal performance state mentally and physically.
So then because as you know, playing sports in the moment, it's so intense. There's a lot going on. How do you help, or what do you suggest athletes do in the moment of, like you said, let's say they miss a shot, or I don't know, have a turnover, whatever it is. get back into that present moment and not be thinking and ruminating over what just happened.
Yeah, the strategy, right? Like the
Yeah.
actual how to.
Yeah.
Because again, we know it's important to do it, but how do you do it?
Hmm.
So one of the biggest things for me that I educate college athletes, high school athletes that I work with is grounding, which is using techniques to take your mind away from what's creating like anxiousness and bring it to the present moment. What's always present is the body. Our body is with us 24/7. So one of the grounding strategies that I use that I find quite effective, even though it's quite simple, is taking a deep breath. So literally noting like, ooh, my mind is noisy, or ooh, my mind is already in a future that doesn't exist yet. Like, I'm going to let the future me handle the future. I'm going to let present me handle the present. Take a deep breath, feel the cold air enter your nose, fill your belly, and then feel warm air exit your mouth. You're activating your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your relaxation response. And you're also now mentally focusing on your physical breath. So you're bringing yourself back to now. It's like kind of a magnet back to the present moment, or an anchor. If breathing doesn't work, which usually it's quite effective, but if breathing feels maybe too like cliche or whatever, another one that I use with athletes is to feel their feet on the ground and wiggle their toes and literally feel and focus mentally on the sensation of all 10 toes wiggling in your shoe. Like go big toe, second toe, third toe, fourth toe, fifth toe, and both feet. And now all of a sudden your mind's not racing to a future of what you need to have happen, but your mind's actually back to the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
So those are a couple like physical cues that athletes can use to relax their body, relax their mind, and reconnect mind and body.
If a basketball coach, let's say, I don't know, middle school, high school,
Mhm.
aged, wanted to encourage more resilience or confidence in their athletes, what are a few simple things that you might recommend to them?
Yeah, it's interesting. I talk with college athletes a lot about resilience. Like, what is resilience?
Yeah.
Um, and I ask a lot, what is the one necessary requirement? What is the one ingredient we need in order to build resilience? And athletes are usually like, huh? You know, and the answer is going through a struggle. We need to struggle in order to become more resilient. That could be mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, whatever. But if we are going through a difficult moment, that's an opportunity for resilience. So first, reframing difficult moments as opportunities to become stronger, more resilient, etc. A better athlete, you name it. So that's the first thing, is like reframing that and recognizing that you actually like need a hard moment. So yay, when there's a bad moment, it's like, good, I'm about to be more resilient. Awesome. Hard for athletes to accept that in the moment. So some mental skills that help build resilience in addition to confidence, first and foremost, mindfulness. Again, I bring it up, being present, mind and body, but noticing when your mind goes to this like, doubtful place, and like being able to recognize that and redirect your mind to the present moment, because doubts only exist about future outcomes. So bringing yourself back to the present moment. And it's ironic because with confidence, we think a lot of times like, oh, when I'm more confident, then I'll attempt that between the legs in a game. This was me in high school for sure. When I'm more confident, I'll do that spin move in transition. When I'm more confident, I'll do a Euro step, whatever. And the truth is, confidence is kind of gained when we attempt the hard thing, not when we're more confident then we attempt the hard thing. It's actually the exact opposite. When I attempt this hard thing, I'm gaining confidence because I'm telling myself it's in my realm of possibility. So attempting hard things and like challenging athletes and encouraging athletes to try hard things and not criticize them if they fail. I see so many coaches criticize their athletes if they're imperfect and make mistakes. No, them attempting that and putting themselves in that risky position is actually them showing you, I'm ready to attempt this stuff. I'm trying to build confidence. And then the other thing that builds confidence too, the number one mental skill that impacts confidence, is self-talk in the moment. If I'm stepping on the court for a playoff game and our team is up against the defending champions, if I say to myself, oh, shoot, this team is so good, they're going to beat us. Oh my God, it's going to be such an embarrassing game. We better do okay. I hope we're not. Your internal dialogue there, that self-talk, is not feeding the confident version of you. So maybe instead of having that, being able to reframe to, what an opportunity this is. I'm on the court with these athletes. I deserve to be here. I've trained all summer. Let's see what happens. That self-talk is a little bit more uplifting and encouraging. It's not saying we're going to dominate this team. No, they might be a lot better, but saying like, let's see what happens. I know I've been working hard all summer. That feeds that confident version of yourself. So self-talk, really important. Staying present in the moment, very important. Reframing obstacles as opportunities, very important. So those are kind of three things that I think of off the bat.
Yeah, that's in one thing that I'm hearing throughout, like as a theme throughout all of this, is really the key ingredient to me, if we're talking about building this cake again, the key ingredient is noticing. So like not allowing your mind to kind of go, it's to say, oh, I'm thinking about this thing, or I am not, just even noticing that I am not in the present moment, or noticing my self-talk is not very conducive to who I want to be or making me feel good. And so I think even just like pausing to notice will do a lot of good, even if you don't have some of these other tools yet, because to me, that sounds like the first step. Is there anything else you would say about that?
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on. That's like very kind of insightful of you to say. I feel that not enough athletes know themselves and their own tendencies. They just criticize themselves without even trying to understand. And imagine having a best friend or a partner or something where you're like just criticizing them for being a certain way instead of wondering like what led to this, like what's going on. So I think for us, like giving ourselves some compassion and grace and recognizing we're all imperfect. So if the goal is perfection, we're going to fail every time. It's not a goal. So getting to know yourself and knowing kind of where you do struggle or where there are moments of kind of lapse where it's like, ooh, like when an official makes a bad call, I shut down for 3 possessions. That was me. I was like a little fiery. My parents like threatened me with anger management when I was younger because I would get pissed if I like missed a shot or if a ref made a bad call or if a teammate didn't see me wide open. Like I had a bit of emotion dysregulation. So being able to know yourself and notice your own tendencies, both physically and mentally, because once you're aware, then you can do something about it. There's actually research that says labeling your emotion, naming it, oh, I'm overwhelmed. Oh, I'm anxious. Oh, I'm angry. Oh, I'm afraid. That actually decreases the intensity of it because now you're in a position of awareness, which puts you in a position of power. I can do something about this. So yeah, you're spot on, like noticing and knowing. And I would say kind of to piggyback to giving yourself space to reflect after games, after practices, etc.
Yeah, and one thing you said, naming the emotion, I find a lot of the younger athletes that I were even actually no, you can probably test this too. Even some of the college athletes is like they they don't have the language. It's like they feel something and they just label it as mad. And it's like maybe it's not, maybe you're not mad. Maybe it's like you said, overwhelmed. Like there's a host of emotions that you could feel. And so sometimes I feel like just giving them a little bit of the language of how to label things really kind of goes a long way too. Because I feel like happy, sad, like those are the ones that we always just kind of stack on.
Yeah, yeah. And I will say, like, if you're interested in kind of the emotion, like labeling and naming emotions, Brene Brown is a good
Oh,
resource.
she's the best.
Yeah. So she talks a lot about human emotion. She talks about vulnerability, all these things that we, deem in human, especially in the sport culture, as like weakness. It's not weakness, it's awareness. So I think, she talks about how most adults, I forget the exact number, know like 3 to 5 words to describe their emotional state. But humans can feel over 80 emotions. We just don't have a language around it, which is so interesting. So yeah, getting a better language around feelings, and to use mad or anger as an example, that's usually a secondary emotion, which means that it's coming from someplace else. It's just easier to express anger than it is to express being overwhelmed or anxious or sad or, unimportant, So I think really without judgment, knowing how you're feeling and how you're doing physically and mentally is so critical. But a lot of athletes are afraid of that.
hmm Yeah. How might you, or what could a parent do to best support their athlete from a mental health perspective? You mentioned your parents threatening anger management.
Yeah. So, on the record, my parents are wonderful.
I'm sure they no, I'm sure they are. It sounds like they care.
Yeah. But, and that's how I read it as a kid, but parents now, I think this generation is very different than our generation growing up. I know we're the same age. And this generation is different. Like we didn't have social media. We didn't have a lot of the pressures that kids now have. So parents really building those relationships with kids. And I think one of like the simplest things in this, I don't know if this really answers your question, but one of the simplest things I've noticed is quite helpful with parents and kids is instead of naming like what the child did on the basketball court, like expressing your observations with how they looked. Hey, it looked like you were playing with a lot of joy out there. Hey, it looks like you really were working hard tonight. Like that's awesome. Hey, it looks like you really like had fun with your teammates, as opposed to you had a double, great job. That's kind of that conditional, you're good if. So with parents, it's really acknowledging like how their kid feels and asking the kid, hey, how did it feel playing tonight? How was practice today? Like, how'd you feel? And if the kid goes into this tangent about coach did this and that and the other thing, and like, how do you feel? Like, how was that for you? What happened in those moments? And did you struggle to kind of like redirect and like, ask? Parents aren't meant to be therapists. So I would never say to a parent that they have to be qualified to do that. But acknowledging the importance of like mentals and emotionals and how their kid's feeling, because we know when a kid's feeling better, they're going to perform better. So, noting how the kid feels as opposed to what they're doing on the court.
I have potentially a radical idea that I've been like thinking about for a few months, actually.
Oh.
I don't think that I could control this, but I wonder what would it be like if you did it, and this has nothing to do with parents per se, but if you banned a post-game talk. The only thing you're allowed to say, if anything, well, you have to say this. The only thing you're allowed to say is, I really enjoyed watching you all play. And just like leave any feedback for practice or, next time. What are your thoughts on that?
As a parent doing that, correct?
I don't know. I kind of think coaches too.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think it's a really I'll use the word interesting. It's a really interesting idea because like post-game talks as a coach, like I'm not in the coaching space right now as far as like the X's and O's of the game. So I'm not in the locker room after games debriefing with the team, but this, that's in a very emotional state.
For like, coaches and players alike.
For sure. Like, is there actually anything being absorbed in those moments? I'm not sure. Yeah. So it's kind of it's an interesting thought. And I think it could be a cool exercise to see how it goes. Maybe just like giving instead, like you tell me, but like giving the athletes and the coaches an opportunity. Like I'm a big journaler. Like everyone has a notebook in the locker room after the game. Like we're going to reflect in our journals individually. We're going to come back tomorrow and talk as a group. That might be really interesting.
I think it's interesting. I don't think it could do any harm. So there's that. Yeah, because I always think about the idea that you don't go grocery shopping when you're hungry. So you shouldn't, you probably shouldn't speak to a group of people that you're mad at when you're mad. Or plan practice after a loss. Shouldn't do that.
Right. And let me just say too, like coaches are going through it as well during games, after games, and maybe more sometimes because their jobs can be on the line. So there's a lot of that emotional side with the coaches as well. And coaches also need to know themselves and their own tendencies. I get really angry and upset after games. I feel like I didn't do my part. I typically take it out on the athletes. Maybe it's best to take a beat and not do that, not go grocery shopping when I'm hungry, so to speak. So I think it's interesting to think of it in that way. And I actually do wonder, if that would be effective. I feel that it might.
Who knows? Maybe we'll find out one day.
Yeah, you let me know about this experiment you're doing. And I do think it's interesting too with the parents on that kind of same idea, like not talking to their kids after games. I remember the worst thing to hear, and my dad would say it in like a loving way. I feel like I'm like bashing my family. I love my family. But my dad would tell me I had a solid performance. That was solid. I, as an athlete perfectionist, was like, I played awful, like solid. So he still jokes to this day. He'll like use the word solid to like, push my buttons if I'm doing something. Oh, there's a solid podcast, you know? And I'm like, oh, like I hate that word so much. But he didn't get into the nitty gritty. And I appreciate that so much. After games, he's not like, so tell me why you missed those 4 free throws.
Mm-hmm.
He never did that. And I think that's why we had such a great bond because he wasn't like nitpicking, critiquing my performance right after. Just solid. Great game. Solid is probably the worst thing, quote unquote, that he ever said to me. But I do think there's also value in car ride conversations with parents after games because you're sitting in a shared space with your kid, heightened emotion, perhaps, and you're not forcing your kid to stare at you in the eyes. That's very uncomfortable. So sometimes like sitting in the car side by side is a more vulnerable place for a kid to express. So parents can always check in. How are you feeling? Do you want to talk about it or would you rather not? And let the kid guide it. Even like, do you want to hear my feedback? Do you want to hear what I saw? Or would you rather not talk about it? Do you want to talk about, you know what I mean? And like just letting the kid guide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. I feel very fortunate that neither one of my parents played sports, so they had no idea what was going on. So we never really talked about anything related to sports because they were just like, you ran fast, you know?
Yeah.
Good job.
Looks good to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I have last couple of questions that I ask all guests. What book or podcast would you recommend every young athlete read and why?
Mm.
Or listen
So
to if it's a podcast.
yeah, and it's funny. I listen to and read a lot of things. So what comes to mind initially, obviously, I mentioned Brene Brown as far as like human emotion goes. If we're talking mental performance, I actually have gotten the book Mind Gym for a lot of my athletes in the past, just kind of food for thought on the importance of the mind. And then also there's a book called The Mindful Athlete. It was written by George Mumford. You say young athlete, so
You
he
can you
does talk.
can interpret that how you want.
Yeah, he talks a little bit about his own substance use problem. So I don't,
Oh,
depending
gotcha.
on the age, but he worked with NBA All-Stars on the importance of mindfulness in sport and how like staying in the present moment is quite efficient and effective when it comes to being an athlete and taking care of your mentals. So that was an interesting read for me. And then there are other books I have as well that I don't want to keep going on and on, but other books about like the actual mental skills that are important. So yeah, I would say those Mind Gym, The Mindful Athlete. Um,
All
yeah,
right,
Brene Brown.
perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you could make one rule that all basketball coaches or coaches in general had to follow, what would it be and why?
I don't know how much of a specific rule this is, but
Or intention.
build genuine relationships with each individual athlete. Every athlete is different. Every athlete is motivated by different things. Every athlete is on the court for different reasons. And get to know your people. Let them know that you care. Athletes will be motivated to play hard for a coach that they respect and love, who they feel respected and loved by. I've seen so many times amazing athletes not, meeting their own potential because of an unhealthy relationship dynamic with their coach. So as coaches, I would say like taking the time to invest in each individual athlete, build relationships, and then second tier is do the mental work yourself. Don't ask your athletes to do it and you not do it. So keeping it a 2-lane road, I think, is actually quite important as well. So many coaches invest in professionals like myself to work with their team, but never once ask about themselves. They're performing as well. So yeah.
Love that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really good.
Yeah.
If anybody is maybe interested in you or some of the work that you're doing, is there any place where they can learn more about that?
Mm. I used to have a website. I do not have that anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, athletes can find me. I hate to say this because I sound so corporate, but athletes can find me on LinkedIn because I do have one and a presence that's more professional. I have an Instagram, by my name. You could just find it, but it's partially personal, partially like mental performance. So it's kind of a little mix, but I always encourage individuals to reach out to me if they have questions. I'd be happy. I used to be way more invested in like posting content when I was doing more private practice work, but now with Northeastern, I'm a little bit less on that like posting content mode and a little bit more like on campus.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's a
yeah.
little bit different, but I would say, reaching out to me, whether that be on like social media or, LinkedIn, Instagram, those are kind of the two places I live. But yeah.
All right,
And
awesome.
also, I think like you could find like a bunch of like podcasts that I've been a guest on if you search my name. But
Oh, that's true. Yeah, there are a bunch. So I encourage people to listen to those as well. But Nicole, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your time.
yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. If you aren't already, I would highly recommend subscribing to the podcast so you can get updated once new episodes are dropped. If you're a fan of the show, go ahead and leave a review. It really helps spread the word to more athletes, parents, and coaches. Now, if you have any questions for myself or future guests, feedback, or you're curious on how we can work together to help you reach your basketball goals, let's have a conversation. Feel free to email me at l@hoopsthroughlife.com today to set that up. That's el@hoopsthroughlife.com. Thank you, and I look forward to hearing from you soon.